and former parliamentary deputy Oleg Kalashnikov, who was a member of the Party of Regions, which was the party of the deposed president who was overthrown in the U.S.-backed right-wing coup last February. The spokesperson for the Ukrainian junta's interior ministry had this to say after the second assassination. He said, "Everyone who was involved in the organization and financing of anti-Maidan, that is the anti-fascist movement, or other unlawful acts against Maidan, and feels a threat to their life, please contact the law enforcement agencies so as not to follow the path of Kalashnikov and Buzina. In other words, turn yourself in or be killed." A report in the Kyiv Post today, which is the English language mouthpiece of the junta, said that a group using the name of the Ukrainian insurgent army had taken responsibility for the murders, as well as for several other deaths and suspicious suicides of opposition figures over the past month. The context for all of this crisis is threefold. Last week's law by the parliament, the Rada of Ukraine, outlawing communism, that is, outlawing the doctrines, propaganda, symbols of communism, and anything that glorifies Soviet history. Another law passed the same day, which enshrines the role of the pro-fascist, pro-imperialist groups that supported the Nazi occupation in World War II as freedom fighters. And finally, the arrival this week of a first wave of United States military troops onto Ukrainian soil to train some of the worst of the fascist elements that have been fighting against the People's Republics, the independent forces in the Donbass. A comrade in Spain yesterday turned me on to this website called psb4ukr.org, which is a semi-official Ukrainian website that is basically a kill list of opposition figures from all across the political spectrum. Just a cursory look at it for a few minutes, I found three of our comrades from Borotba, the communist organization, on this hit list, as well as what they do is once someone is assassinated or dies in the war, they mark them as destroyed on this website. So I've comrade who was in Borotba, who was fighting in Donbass, who died a few months ago, was listed as, this person is destroyed. One of the journalists who was killed this week, Olis Basina, is listed as destroyed. This is the level of the political situation in Ukraine and the integration and the overpowering rise of the fascist elements even within this far-right dictatorship that was introduced under U.S. auspices last year. There's an orgy of destruction that was unleashed after the anti-communist ban was introduced last week. Soviet monuments in many cities, in Kramatorsk, Kharkov, and other places that have been destroyed. Now they're destroying them in broad daylight rather than in the dead of night like they were before. There has been a long-standing legal case brought by the junta against the Communist Party of Ukraine to ban the party. This court case has not yet been decided, but Obviously, the anti-communist ban passed by the legislature last week gives a lot of weight to it. And in fact, since the ban, some of the regional councils in different areas of Western Ukraine are adopting measures to ban not only the Communist Party. For example, in the Ivano-Frankivsk region in the west, the regional council has banned on its territory all activities of the Communist Party, the Party of Regions, the Opposition Bloc, and the Party of Ukraine, which are all considered like, you know, other than the Communist Party, we're all sort of bourgeois, centrist parties under the old regime. This Security Service of Ukraine, which is like the FBI, and is responsible for carrying out a lot of the repression against the political opposition, this week seized 130 computer servers, web servers, in Kyiv, and has shut down thousands of websites since last week. The banning of, you can read more details about the anti-communist ban in this week's issue of Workers' World. There's an article on page 8. So I'm not going to cover a lot of that material, but just to say that, you know, it's no coincidence that this law was passed 1 month before the 70th anniversary of the Soviet victory over fascism, which is celebrated on May 9th, Victory Day. And now any Red Army veteran who goes out in Ukraine on Victory Day wearing their medals for helping to destroy Hitler fascism or carrying a victory banner is liable to be arrested and could face 5 to 10 years in prison. Meanwhile, those who aided Hitler and the genocide of peoples in the Soviet Union, including in Ukraine through many years of occupation, are being celebrated and lauded and given rewards. And we should never forget that 27 million Ukrainian and other Soviet peoples died in the war to destroy fascism. The same day the ban was passed, as I mentioned, they passed this law glorifying the role of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, an organization of Ukrainian nationalists and other groups that collaborated with the Nazi occupation and later collaborated with the CIA in waging acts of terror against the Soviet Union. A presidential document was leaked today that was sent to all the media in Ukraine, instructing them, this is from the President of Ukraine's office, Peter Poroshenko, instructing them in their coverage of the 70th anniversary of the end of the war to emphasize the non-existent role of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army in fighting the Nazis. Actually, they were the instrument of the Nazis in Ukraine, and also to call it World War II rather than the Great Patriotic War, which is how it's known in the former Soviet Union. Meanwhile, the build-up for the next round of military assault against the independent Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics in the Donbass is full steam ahead with U.S. NATO support. Every day sees an increase in the number of violations by the Ukrainian forces, violations of the ceasefire agreement that was signed last month, in February. And behind it all, you know, this tremendous economic crisis, austerity, the country facing bankruptcy that's being staved off every few months by injection of money from the IMF at the U.S.'s instruction. In fact, one of the hardest hitting things that's going to affect workers throughout Ukraine is going to be felt right around the time between May Day and May 9th, Victory Day, and that is a huge increase in utilities rates across the board that went into effect on April 1st, and that people will start feeling at the beginning of May. A few words about the arrival of the U.S. troops this week and what that signifies. 290 commandos from the 173rd Airborne Division of the U.S. Army, stationed in Italy, arrived yesterday in Lvov, in western Ukraine near the Polish border, following what some Russian media termed a hundreds of miles long military parade through Eastern Europe, which was this huge convoy of U.S. forces, basically from Italy all the way to Ukraine. Washington and Wall Street are taking steps now to consolidate their control by integrating the fascists more deeply into the state structures in Ukraine. The failure of the regular Ukrainian army, despite repeated draft call-ups and the repeated defeats of Ukrainian offensive against Donbass, has put the U.S. in a position where they feel that they need to take a direct hand rather than push and prod from behind the scenes. And so now they are stage managing and sort of no longer letting the competing factions in the junta battle it out amongst themselves for supremacy. They're taking a leadership role in deciding, you're out, you're in. We're going to integrate the fascists into the military. We're going to send U.S. troops in to train them. The U.S. wants a NATO-occupied Ukraine as a staging ground for the destruction of independent capitalist Russia. No ifs, ands, or buts, and they're determined to do whatever they have to do to have this happen. One of the leaders of Donetsk People's Republic, Denis Pushilin, said, "This is a conscious policy. In combination with moving up of military equipment, this is meant to escalate the conflict." And there can be no doubt about that. Another example of how the U.S. is guiding things is that Dmitry Yarosh, the head of the fascist right sector, has been appointed as a key advisor to the military. The training of the training of the Azov Battalion, which is an openly Nazi right sector grouping within the National Guard, which flies a flag that has Nazi symbolism. And in fact, right now, the latest thing that's happening is that a Ukrainian news site showed that Azov Battalion is now flying the U.S. flag alongside right sector and Ukraine flags in occupied Mariupol in Donetsk. And also today, when right sector toppled a statue of Lenin in occupied Kramatorsk, they were flying the U.S. flag. Russia has rightly pointed out that this is also an important step towards the U.S. directly supplying weaponry to the junta. They're going to be training the most dedicated military forces under the junta's control to handle the most sophisticated U.S. NATO weaponry, which is going to be coming to them. And moving forward, Azov and other fascist volunteer brigades that are being integrated into the military will now be armed and outfitted by the Ministry of Defense rather than through middlemen of the oligarchy. A sure sign of the Pentagon putting its occupation footprint in Ukraine is a report that this week that 2 U.S. soldiers and 2 U.S. mercenaries raped teenagers in Kyiv. And we know that that goes hand in hand with U.S. imperialist occupation everywhere around the world. Russia is continuing to speak in a more or less conciliatory tone, trying to find measures of compromise with imperialism, while obviously they know that in the long run that's not viable. But even yesterday, Russian President Putin had a long Q&A with the media, and spent only 12 minutes of it talking about the situation in Donetsk and speaking in very conciliatory terms, even calling the Ukrainian government partners. And this is a worrisome development, obviously. There are positive developments, and I want to wrap up on that. Thank you. The forces in Donbass are standing tough. Whatever the relationship of the current leadership in Donetsk and Lugansk is to Moscow, and it's a complicated, messy thing, the Donetsk government especially is clear that there will be no peace. There can be no peace through making further concessions to Ukraine. And Donetsk has declared that it will accept political refugees resulting from the decisions of the Ukrainian government over the past week. 1,000 people reportedly so far have gone there seeking shelter. In a rare interview by a mainstream Western media outlet, in this case Bloomberg, Donetsk leader Zakharchenko said that, for example, Mariupol will eventually be part of the People's Republics. And he said, "We will liberate all of our compatriots. Don't forget, our mothers and sisters live there, so don't make us out to be bloodthirsty beasts." This is a very different tone than what's being struck by Russia. Another good sign is that the Ghost Brigade, the most radical of the militia groups, which has been on the hit list of the official leadership in Lugansk for the last period, is now being integrated into the Lugansk People's Militia after an assassination attempt last month on its leader, Alexei Moskovoy. Now they've been able, in large part, I think, because of the role that the most radical forces, including the communist and internationalist volunteers in the Ghost Brigade, played during the last defeat of the Ukrainian forces at Debaltsevo, has really strengthened their hand to the point where now we're the more conservative forces in Lugansk were trying to break up the Ghost Brigade. Now they're being integrated into the Lugansk military as a unit, and they're no longer having to divide up. Unity of left forces in Lugansk is also moving forward. A forum of communist, socialist, workers, environmental, and anti-fascist forces has been formed in Lugansk by former members of the Communist Party of Ukraine, on the left wing, folks who are close to our friends from Borotba. And they have called for an international solidarity forum on May 8th in Lugansk in coordination with the organizers of the second anti-fascist caravan to Donbass. The international conference is titled Anti-Fascism, Internationalism, and Solidarity. This historic first meeting of international left forces in the People's Republics is also has a main goal of establishing an international coordination of solidarity work, which is really badly needed. And I'm happy to say that the IAC, International Action Center, and Workers' World Party have been asked to participate in this forum and will be represented at this event. Finally, I want to remind everyone, because the press of activities is so much, we would like to be able to do more than we're able, but we should not forget that in just a couple of weeks, on May 2nd, will mark the first anniversary, the one-year anniversary of the massacre of 48 anti-fascists in Odessa, Ukraine. We are going to have a banner and signs and other activities at the May Day rally at Union Square on May 1st to mark this anniversary. And I hope that comrades will come and come by the banner. We know people have a lot of different responsibilities, but we want to be able to take some nice pictures to share with our comrades and to be able to send to the conference in Lugansk. So please keep that in mind, and if we get information on more activities happening around that, we will let you know. Next week, the paper, in the next couple of weeks, the paper and workers.org will have some more detailed information on what's happening in the mobilization for an independent people's investigation of the Odessa massacre and activities that are taking place around the world to commemorate it. And so, in closing, we just want to say, U.S. out of Ukraine, we stand with the Donbass republics and the anti-fascists in Ukraine. We are very happy to be part of this movement, and we'll continue to do our best to represent this struggle moving forward.